Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to announce that we have three amazing moderators or panelists who are about to join me. And I'd like to first call out Catherine Blackmore from Oracle. She's the Global Vice President of Customer Success. And next we have Matt Zelen from Acton, where he's been for the past year. He also comes from an Oracle background. Matt? And last but not least, we have Chris Dishman. He is from On24, where he's been for the past 12 years, holding a variety of customer roles. All right, well, thank you for joining me. Let's have a seat. So just so we can get to know the crowd or our panelists a little bit better, I'd love to ask you, what is your favorite app that you have on your phone right now?
I can start on this one. I'm sure it's an app that just about every business leader has at the ready, and it's Snapchat. And the reason, speaking of that, I'm going to pull it out right now, because the reason why Snapchat is my go-to right now is my daughter recently got a phone, and with as much as I travel, it is an awesome way for us to stay in touch. So.
Perfect. So I'm directionally challenged. So I have to say Google Maps is definitely mine. And it's saved me a few minutes here and there. And I'm not a fan for traffic, a little impatient, so that helps. So.
What about you, Catherine?
Well, I guess impatience would relate to mine, but it's not to do from a business standpoint. But I would recommend it actually if you have impatient colleagues. In my case, impatient 10 and 12-year-olds standing in line, anything that's really boring. We leverage this app called Charades. I highly recommend it. It's been a great pastime for us.
Great. Well, thank you again for joining me. The purpose of our panel today is to really talk about the future of customer success, what the chief customer officers are thinking about. And what I'd like to start with is building on Claire Barge's session this morning. She talked about the chaos and how we should embrace artificial intelligence. So I'd like to ask you, how are you embracing artificial intelligence in your role?
Well, I'll start. I think that from an artificial intelligence standpoint, I would flip it a little bit and I would think of intelligence augmentation. And I think it's an important distinction because when I think about my customer success organization and the path that we are on, Oracle Marketing Cloud is a combination of 5 different acquired companies, Eloqua, Responsys, BlueKai, Compendium, and Maximizer. And that is a huge change management initiative for us to build this customer success organization. But in addition to that, we really need to segment what our customer's journey is all about. And if anything, the only way we are going to accomplish that at scale is by arming our organization with the intelligence of our customers to really drive that optimum experience, as well as know how we can actually reach out and make sure we're touching them in the right moment in terms of helping them achieve what their business outcomes need to be.
I'd like to add on to that. So I think one of the key points that we think about in the data and the intelligence around that is efficiency of the team, right? As we think about the more data and the more information we have, the better decisions we can make and the more accurately we can deploy the resources that we have. Obviously, not something that we can hire everybody for everything. So that's where the artificial intelligence and chatbots and things like that of the future are going to allow us to just be more efficient with the teams and the resources we have.
I think the one thing too to add on that is I think efficiency is really important, and it really comes down to prioritizing our engagements. So we use it a lot to understand just behaviors with our customers and making sure we're catching leading indicators of success or failures. And where we have leading indicators of failures, we want to make sure we identify those customers and proactively reach out. And for us, in terms of scaling our engagement, it really allows us to prioritize which customers we need to reach out to and proactively assist and help make sure they're successful.
And when it comes to this artificial intelligence, I think there's this looming question of how are chatbots going to impact your role and your teams as we approach 2020?
I can start on this one. I think it's really going to help facilitate the customer engagement. I don't think at all it's going to replace the individual impacts that we're going to need to have. So I think it's chatbots and whatnot are really going to help us drive information to customers where necessary, but also I don't think it's ever going to take the place of a real live person getting out and engaging with a customer, where we really need a customer or that customer success manager to fully understand the use case, what's going on in that customer's environment, and to make a real-time decision to help that customer get a solution that truly meets their needs.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree with you. And I think that, you start talking about, in the presentation earlier, they talked about empathy, right? And the empathic listening. A chatbot certainly is not going to be able to do that, right? So what this does, again, it allows you to make the CSM, or allow the CSM to actually be more effective and more efficient and more strategic in their deployment.
There was an interesting stat I read recently from Gartner that said by the year 2020, you will actually talk to a bot more than your significant other. Now, I won't suggest about relationship success, but certainly from a customer success standpoint, it does mean that we need to really think about how we're going to embrace this technology. But before we go there, I would highly recommend, and these are things that we're thinking about right now, not just within our own customer success organization, but also as we talk to our customers, marketers, around how they can build their optimal customer experience for their end customers. We think a lot about the strategy that has to mirror what you're investing from a technology standpoint, because any solution you throw out there, if you don't have the strategy of how you're going to deploy that intelligently, it's not going to save a customer. It's not even going to enhance that experience unless you really understand how it's going to be fed into how people and technology are going to come together.
So building on that, do you dedicate a specific amount to this artificial intelligence? Are you putting as part of your budget a piece that is going towards this technology?
I'll start with that one. So I think the key thing is you're going to have to evaluate the return and the value you're going to get out of that, right? So obviously you have a certain amount that you're spending on resources, and if we can determine or define how much you can save by the intelligence that you are getting out of out of the data that you have, I think that's going to be key. So once you can weigh that percentage, then it'll determine what it is. And I think it'll be vastly different based on obviously technology and deployment, but even customer set, whether it's a SMB or smaller customer, maybe it's a larger enterprise customer. So you're gonna have to weigh all those aspects in evaluating how much you do spend on that.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'll add to that is I agree with you from a return-driven decision process, just to make sure you're making the right decisions. I do think, and it would encourage every customer, regardless of whether you're small, mid-sized enterprise, you have to continue to evolve and continue to move forward in what you're doing. And if you don't consciously set aside a portion of your investment in the new technologies that are coming out, you're going to be left behind. And so I would say, I think going along with what you're saying, it'd be hard to say that you need to set aside 5% or 10% or 15% of your budget to go against technology. But I do think that you always should have earmarked a portion of your budget to further invest in the technology that drives your resources and the success of your customers.
Catherine, do you have anything to add to that? You're managing an organization of over 300 people. I imagine that's a big question for you.
It is. I would say, in addition to the technology, I would say you need to also invest effort around the change management that will go with it. I think that the only way you're going to really maximize that ROI, depending on whatever dollar amount there is, and I definitely concur, there has to be a level of where you just can't scale through people alone. There's no way you can manage and maintain customer intimacy, the data associated with what your customers are really needing from you, from your support organization, from your services organization, from customer success, and even feeding it back into sales. But really without the aspect of where you would think about the business process improvement that goes around it, that's where I see definitely organizations succeeding or failing in terms of what sits on the shelf and as a nice to have, and that's just great we have it, versus it's really being implemented and driving that ROI outcome.
Great. So when I started in customer success around 2005, the word Chief Customer Success Officer didn't really exist. It wasn't a title. And I recently attended an event, and the speaker from Google said 80% of the jobs that kindergartners, and I have one, will have when they graduate don't exist today. And I was thinking, wow, that's the Chief Customer Success Officer role. Didn't exist. And then in 2006, Jean Bliss wrote a book about her role and being in that role. And I'm curious, what do you see as the emerging trends? Obviously, since 2006, things have changed, but between now and 2020, what do you see as the big trends?
It's a great question. One thing I'll add to that, I think just in general, the industry changes on a regular basis. You look at the huge impact the introduction of cloud computing had at the late 90s and early 2000s, which is really what started the need for this type of a role, like a chief customer officer. For the most part, because when you get to a subscription model, which we're now all really closely tied to for the most part, the retention of the customer is huge. And the focus on the post-sale side of things and having a chief customer officer or that type of role in your organization that focuses on retention and has a pulse on the health of the customer base and behaviors of the customer base, it's huge. And I would imagine in 20 years from now, 25 years from now, there may be another shift, right, where a new role comes in, and it could be those roles that we don't know that are there yet. But I think from a trend standpoint, we've been talking about it a little. It's really around data and artificial intelligence and driving data-driven engagements and understanding the behaviors of our customers that truly show leading indicators of success and failures, and trying to leverage that and leverage your team to engage where appropriate. That's the trends that we're seeing. And right now we do leverage Totango to help drive that for Acton here, and it's been a huge impact on our business over the last year.
I think it's interesting in terms of this evolution you talked about, in terms of where we've been and how far we've come. And just within a decade, even to think about how a lot of customer success organizations really got started out of critical accounts, red accounts, customers leaving, wanting to walk out the door. And it was that firefighter mentality that was really valued at first. But I think it's interesting because as you keep pulling the thread of what was going on and that leader keeps asking questions, well, why did the customer leave? And gosh, how can we keep them here? Well, if we think about our most successful customers, what makes them most successful? And this is those data conversations. What can we learn? And then as you start understanding where you can indicate where customers may be at risk or even stay, you also need to think about, well, why would both or either occur? And then what could we be doing to drive better behavior across the organization? And then you start to realize the customer success organization is really that mirror back to the company on all the areas that you need to improve upon, whether it's your product, your sales process, even your marketing efforts. And so it's no surprise that if you think about the evolution of this chief customer officer, customer success officer, it's that journey of learning. And we're now starting to see this role becoming so critical that it's sitting directly reporting into the CEO. And really, I call it that CEO consigliere, that person that's so important as that advisor to the CEO, that's really that strategic role that we didn't see a decade ago.
I think additionally, it's one of those things where it's predictive and it's proactive, right? Which is what we're saying. And it's starting to encompass more than just the customer success team or more than just the support team. It's, used to be it was everybody is in sales, right? Now it's everybody's in customer success. And it's becoming more overarching across, whether it's marketing or product or support or even finance or billing, right? So anybody who has an engagement or a touch point with the customer is now a part of the customer success team because they all play a role in that. And I think it's going to continue to evolve, in that direction.
When we were in the back, we talked a little bit about what falls under the Chief Customer Officer, and everyone had very different views on what that meant. Can you tell the audience a little bit? Maybe you want to start.
I can start because we talk a little bit about my umbrella at Acton. At Acton, underneath CSG, or the Customer Success Group, I'm really ultimately responsible for all of training, all of support, all of our customer success management function, our professional services organization, and inside sales or renewals. And one of the things that came up is why would you have inside sales really or renewals function within the post-sale side of the organization, customer success function? And this was a specific decision that we made as an organization to decouple that group from our front end field sales organization. And part of it was to have a group underneath our success group that would be responsible for the renewal event. And that means, visibility into our customers, giving the customer notice that the renewal event is coming up, talking through that whole process with the customer. And it is a centralized function that does primarily two things. Those individuals, the renewal managers, own the renewal event. And that means they are responsible for facilitating that process. It doesn't mean they have to actually do every aspect of it. For example, if they identify a growth opportunity, they bring in the account manager or the sales rep to help facilitate that growth opportunity and negotiate those contract terms. If they identify a risk, they bring in the CSM that's assigned to that account to address that risk. And collectively, that team drives the renewal event. One of the reasons that I really push for this as well as a structure is I put a lot of importance and value on the relationship that a CSM has with a customer and the bilateral trust there. And I think if you introduce a situation where the CSM is put in a position to negotiate with the customer, push for a contract renewal, push for an upsell, push for revenue from that contract, you potentially impact the trust that that individual has with a customer. And that trusted relationship is so critically important to the success of not only your company, but your customer. And so we decoupled that and had a renewal manager that facilitates that event, kind of quarterbacks that event, and brings in the associated individuals where needed. But it's a unique situation that it may not be shared across the board.
So I'm going to use that wedge right
What's
there.
that?
I use that wedge right there. He said
There you go.
potential,
There you go.
potential. So we were actually debating backstage because I do think that it depends on a couple of things. One could be your go-to-market strategy. One could be actually headcount. What's my budget look like, and how do I actually have, if I have few resources, what can I do to maximize the team I have? Another is around customer experience, and we actually have a bit of a different model, but we also talked about we have similarities in some places because we talk to chief marketing officers, and the teams are actually quite small. In terms of value creation, especially with large enterprise customers, we are negotiating every day around additional services, around what's happening within their marketing campaign, how we're pushing our customers to become better marketers, great marketers. And if anything, we've analyzed and thought about introducing a renewal representative to this equation. And we found that actually in those scenarios where we are so intimately involved with the customer and what they're trying to accomplish, it would actually degrade the customer experience. And if anything, our customers want to keep having that conversation with our trusted advisor. So it actually hasn't been that awkward moment. But I will say that on the long tail of customers, though, where we're trying to scale, it made a lot more sense.
It's funny, we kind of have a combination of the two. We have renewal managers that are involved and engaged early in the conversation, and it becomes kind of a team effort with the CSM throughout the relationship of the customer. The renewal manager is there for not just the flat renewal, but also the upsell or downsell or negotiation process. Does create some interesting conversations around expansion versus renewal, which is a whole nother story, right? But it definitely is working well for us, and it does, as Matt said, decouples the need for the customer success manager to put themselves out in a position that may make them not look like a customer advisor based on trying to push an upsell or a potential renewal. So
one thing to add to this, because it's clear that as you look at different models in your business, there are multiple models that can work well regardless of the size of your business and what industry you're in. One of the things that we talked about, though, is regardless of the model that works well for your business, it's really important that you are capturing in some sort of a centralized fashion what's going on in your customer's environment, so that regardless if it's a sales rep, regardless if it's a renewal manager or a CSM or even a support rep, they have visibility into the activity. So if it is introducing a new resource into the equation, that resource can spend the time very quickly to come up to speed on what the customer's success plan is, what their business goals were, where they're at in the process in their success journey, and any other interaction. So as much as possible, you minimize the risk of the customer experience, which I think is a great point, being one where you get introduced to somebody new who has no idea of what the history is with that account. So whether it's a CRM system, whether it's other, just make sure you are having a way inside your organizations to track every interaction, the customer success goals, the customer success plan, and where they're at in that journey as well.
wait, but wouldn't that be Zoe?
There you go. There you go.
So there's the plug. Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you 100%. And from what we've seen so far, it looks like that's going to fill a gap that would be tremendous. From my perspective, just in making sure that the disparate teams that you have across the organization are able to have visibility, critical visibility into the customer.
Absolutely.
So building on this, I want to now shift internally a little bit and talk about customer centricity. Peter Fader, he's a Wharton University professor who wrote this book on customer centricity, and it really resonated with me as I was building my team. I'm curious, what are you doing to build this cult of customer centricity in your own organizations?
So one of the ways that we are doing this, and actually it's really important because if you think about as a customer leader, either head of customer success, chief customer officer, you can track KPIs certainly around how you're actually doing in terms of your customer success. Certainly retention is one, growth, expansion, advocacy, adoption. But as I was saying a little bit ago, it's really an isolated mission if you don't think about the alignment that has to occur. I mean, you were just talking about all the folks in the handoffs that we need to have. And this really customer mandate and really building this culture, which is another call to action for a chief customer officer or customer leader, is around how do you actually align the organization to where every person, every department has aligned goals and KPIs, not just one department.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point. I think it goes back to what we talked about a little bit of the, might be bias, right? The importance of a CCO or the importance of this leadership role on the customer side of the organization. I think as we trend forward, especially in subscription model or subscription-based models, businesses, the CCO has such a huge influence in the direction of the company. Whereas historically, it's been more sales-related, marketing-related. I think as we go forward, the post-sale side of the organization, having a pulse on the customer base, a health on the customer base, it's our responsibility to really influence change in the organizations that drive customer success. And part of that is driving a customer-centric sense of culture. And it could be around NPS, which we use at Acton. We drive a consolidated view and focus on NPS across product and CSG and marketing. And it really drives us, all right, the entire company motivated to grow NPS and do the right things across those different groups that align us all together on driving the success of our customers. But it's all in the spirit of driving this customer-centric culture.
Yeah. I don't have much to add other than, I think one of the key KPIs there has got to be predictive, right? Yeah. As we look at that across an organization, most of the time we focus on churn, and that's a trailing indicator, as we all know. And so to be able to take that a step further and look at the analytics, as we were talking earlier, to understand fully a customer where they are and make sure that that information is shared throughout the entire organization. So it's not just the CSM that's saying, hey, this customer's at risk. It's everybody looking at it and understanding cleanly what this customer is and where they are and how mature they are in use of the product, and then being able to deliver a consistent message across the board.
So turning it in a little bit even more, when you're looking at your key performance indicators, you also have to measure yourself. When I first joined WalkMe over 2 years ago, my boss said to me, well, how will you measure yourself? And that's something we do every quarter, and it's ongoing. I'm curious, how do you measure yourselves and your roles?
It is about that alignment of goals, and I would add to when that alignment is occurring and you can get to that point where leaders have combined KPIs and you are really working as one, then really that power, that litmus test is in a couple of ways. Certainly you can look at, are customers growing and expanding? But then I would also argue that equal to that is actually, are you now targeting customers that look like your very best customers? And actually, are you landing customers that will be your next advocate? Because then that means that this model that you've built across every single function is actually targeting customers for life, really thinking about customers for life, not just, as I like to think about it, customers for quota attainment, right? It is really about being able to optimize and maximize the speed to value and really honing in on this product market fit and market opportunity that you've really generated for this alignment.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Typically, and you should always look at retention rates as a way to measure whether or not you're really gaining the trust of your customers and earning their continued business. That's huge. But also customer lifetime value. And really understanding, are you increasing customer lifetime value over time? Watching that metric along with retention rates is pretty important.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, obviously, we're constantly looking at churn, which is the dirty word, but I mean, obviously that's something that we've got to learn from, right? And as I look at it, I want to make sure that we're continuing to learn from the customers that do defect, so that we can make sure that we impact the ones that aren't gone yet.
So with just a few minutes left, I'd love for each of you to expand on some key takeaways that everyone can leave this room thinking about as they prepare to become a leader in the future and to move into 2020 as a Chief Customer Officer.
Sure. I think we've been talking a lot about it, and I think you'll certainly no surprise that first and foremost is about investing in scale, which is all about how are you going to be evolving your department? How are you going to be embracing technologies that are before you? How are you actually going to be thinking about integrating that within your customer success framework? Which then leads to point number 2, how are you investing in your people? Because when I think about how our customers are going to be successful, they really can't get there without our people being successful first. And as we embrace and integrate new ways of working and doing business and listening and talking to our customers, you have to think about your teams and not leaving them behind. You can't do it yourself. Even your managers can't do it for your teams. Everyone needs to be thinking about what the CSM over the next 10 years needs to look like, the next 5 years needs to look like, and really investing in how they will be successful, trained, thinking in a data-driven way for them to arrive at the moment where you can optimize the model that you're building.
Yeah, well put. I think I would add maybe one key takeaway along with that is, as you continue to invest in the technology that's going to drive your business forward and drive the success of your individuals, and allowing your key resources, the people, to have the right tools and information to be successful, which is critically important. In parallel, the value out of your analytics and artificial intelligence tools is going to be dependent on the integrity of the information that drives that. So I wouldn't stop what you're doing to look at the data, but in parallel, really look at making sure you're managing the integrity of the information, that your information infrastructure that supports your data-driven engagements, that supports your AI, because that will allow you to catapult the amount of value you get out of your technology investments going forward.
Yeah, one of the things that we often say is it's people, process, and training, right? And obviously data plays a huge part in that as well, and so I have to add that now to our mix. So it's people, process, training, and data. Doesn't sound as cool, but yeah, I think it's key, right? And training and education around this discipline of customer success, I think, is really important as well. Events like this are fantastic because it allows people to kind of get out of the daily grind and start looking at, hey, what is the future of customer success, and what does that look like for me in my role as a CSM or as a director of customer success, and then how can I help then drive the initiative of the company forward in making sure that we have a successful implementation with our customers. So.
Great. Well, I want to thank you all for your insight, and I'm sure if there are more questions from the crowd, we might be answering them on Twitter. So see you there.
Yeah.
All right,
Great. Thank you. Thank you.